Hello and welcome back from the break. I hope you've made some new connections and chatted with some people. And we're up for a fabulous session now where we are in conversation with Xander Vaughan from Shell and Henrik Larsson from Maersk. And we're going to be talking about harnessing AI and machine learning to optimize performance in procurement. So I'm going to ask Xander and Henrik to join us now. Hey, how are you both?
Doing great. Thanks, Emma. How about yourself?
Yes, very good. Thanks for joining us today. So
you.
we've got a great session coming up here, and I think AI and machine learning all sounds very scary. It sounds very technical. It sounds like it's a major investment. So I think we're going to bust some myths throughout this session and talk about how people can really get a handle on this and some quick wins. So Xander, hopefully if you can kick off by letting us know some of the AI initiatives that you've rolled out in your organization. So we'll start out by hearing a little bit about what you guys have been doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one that really speaks, I guess, to hopefully the audience, is a digital assistant. So we use a tool, and there's many different tools. We use WhatFix, and really the intent of WhatFix for us was initially, hey, how can we help users if you'll find their way, understand what is expected from them. But it also has functionality to really start looking at the screens and the data on the screens and start to adjust what it shows and what it tells users to do, and even perhaps in some cases bring them from screen to screen, so eliminating clicks that users have to do.
Great stuff. Henrik, tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing with AI.
Yeah, a little bit about the same stuff that Sandra just spoke about. So having these buying assistants that find out and pick the right articles and make sure that you don't go far if you can do it short, so to speak. But also having bots that actively engage with our suppliers doing end-to-end e-auctions from these catalogs. If stuff is missing, actually inviting to an e-auction and performing that end-to-end. So we see bots playing actually an end-to-end role now within certain well-defined categories where we have definitions in place.
Absolutely. And so I talked briefly at the beginning about this perception that these types of technology require massive amounts of investment and perhaps a long-term commitment to implement. Are there some quite simple, quick opportunities that don't cost the earth? So it's like some of these bots that you mentioned. Henrik, do you want to answer that one?
Well, I think it requires that you focus and comes from a place where you know you do well in your procurement organization, and then set aside some people that might have slightly different backgrounds, data analysts and people who maybe can write a code, but then get on with it. And it doesn't require massive investment and off-the-shelf big products to get started. And that will give you a good base also with your own constituency, that this is not something to be afraid of. We built it next to you, and it's a tool that will enhance your experience in your daily life. So getting on with it is simple. It requires maybe some different skills from what a category manager or buyer will have, but then get on with it and do it from a place of strength.
Xander, would you kind of agree with that? And have you built any of these tools yourself, or are they just easy to buy off the shelf? Or
Right. Well, so in Shell we've chosen one I guess RPA, one bot builder tool, and we have a center of excellence to build those, and so we have a Botsons family, and they all have little funny I guess looking robotic icons, and they're all over the place. They, I would say, cost, I would say, between $50,000 to $100,000 perhaps to develop, and then I'm just counting the staff cost to really develop these and then maintain them afterwards. One that we just went live with recently, and I think it's really an interesting one. It's a bot that looks at your contract, and it looks at does this contract have an extension clause? If so, it will contact our procurement professional automatically a few weeks before the end date, checks whether the contract should be negotiated or should be extended. Once confirmed, so our procurement professional just needs to click on a link, say, yep, that's it, just please extend. And then the bot does the rest of the work. So it will contact the supplier, extend the contract, update the data in the system. Well, I would say no touch. It's a single touch from a user perspective. But you can imagine it takes out a lot of I'd say low value administrative work. And right now we're testing with a supplier a tool that will then actually on top of that we'll be able to negotiate with that supplier whether we can extend at existing rates or perhaps different rates. So I think what you'll see with these bots is you can add on and on more functionality as you go. It's an easy to create benefits case. $50,000 investment. We can do this 1,000 times a year. Well, what's the value each time? Well, quickly math adds up. You can go and incrementally automate your process.
Excellent. And I guess turning to the implementation of these initiatives, they can take some very simple transactional processes away from procurement teams. And I guess that has two ways of going. There's a more strategic role for procurement teams, getting involved with more interesting activity, but also could create some nervousness and a sense of uneasy on kind of what the future of their role might be. How have you managed that, and have you had to do some upskilling? Henrik, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I think it's you need to be very open about these initiatives, because people will be part of a process where you might get the handover from a robot or a process that's robotized. So people will see it immediately, and it's upon the leaders and the managers to have these dialogues early on that this is coming. And it might be starting as an addition to your skills, so you can go deeper, you can do more of the relationship, because the bot will do all the administrative stuff that Sandra is also talking about, and even the negotiation. But if you don't have the talk, if you don't talk about the upskilling, what do I then need to take on as a category manager, for instance, in order to be able to get to the next level? You're failing in your organization and as a leader. So the upskilling element needs to be there, and it needs to be there in advance of introducing the robotized process. Because if people first see it and you haven't had the talk, then you're already behind the scheme here. So being open that this is what you will roll out and having the upskilling conversations early on is absolutely key for success.
Sander, similar situation for you guys?
Yeah, I fully agree with Henrik. I think the key part is to be really clear on where you want to go as an organization, right? And as you go, that shift of what we call the lower value added activities get replaced, and then staff will be looking at more complex, more creative types of activities. And typically, people are much more interested in doing those things than what feels like admin type work. So I think bringing them along. Now, I think there's another element in there as well, and that's the creating the ability for staff to develop digital skills. And one way we're doing that, we call them digital ninjas. And that really we put the tools, the do-it-yourself tools, in the hands of our what we call our front line, our users, our procurement professionals. So if you have some affinity with digitalization, they can acquire and build on those skills. So they may even end up changing perhaps a bit of a career path, being more of I don't want to say an IT professional, but digitalization expert. So I think there's a lot of opportunity that comes from this as well.
No, absolutely. And I think in terms of attracting and retaining young talent, I think people would expect quite a high level of digitalization. I mean, we talked earlier in a session about young people have grown up in a digital era. So this should be pretty standard stuff in terms of organizations doing if you want to attract the best talent. Is that something you'd agree with, Henrik?
Definitely, and also introducing new roles in procurement, that you have data analysts, you have digital architects, call them ninjas, call them what you want, but that you have a complete new set of roles in procurement to drive us forward. And I think the trick is to have these working together, and even better, as Sandra said, if you can have some of the category managers being part of changing their curriculum going forward even better. But the inspiration needs to come from probably some new profiles added to the procurement community.
Absolutely. We've had a question through, so please submit some questions for this panel, but I'm going to turn to one that we've had through now because it kind of relates to what we're talking about. So contract scanning AI requires large training data set to work. Did you work with your legal teams to standardize templates, clauses, etc., to help the AI know what to flag as an exception? Has anyone delved into that kind of area?
I can share what we have done. So we looked at our legacy contracts to see, can we scan and what can we learn from those contracts, and we call it machine learning, but it's really, of course, it's humans teaching the algorithm, the tool. I think you mentioned it a while back. So we found that actually to get to a high enough success rate, it was quite an investment of time. Now we have I don't say a fully automated contract drafting capability now in our tool set. So our header data, our master data selects the clauses, and then because it's more structured, then indeed our tool, not through scanning but actually through recognition, it knows when a clause has been either changed or removed or not touched, or something new has been entered. So we have that capability, and that works really well.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Henrik, anything to add to that one?
No, I think now is a good time to do it. I think we all in procurement work with these legacies and standardizing contracts to get the data in right for a lot of purposes, but definitely also for this is a key to many organizations right now, because capture data from our vendors and partners is absolutely key for also creating the right customer outcomes further down the line. So definitely.
And turning to the like on that implementation journey, how receptive have your stakeholders been in adopting this technology? I mean, largely, I would imagine it gives them much more insight and access to information and makes some of their life easier. But I guess the culture change in implementing this kind of thing can be tough. Sander, you're nodding there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm in my head, I pictures of different people flash up of different responses we got in these from stakeholders. So I think you have those that by you explaining, I think these are the friction points you have, and these are the solutions we now offer you to help overcome those. And there's this group that very quickly jumps on the bandwagon and runs with it. Others are perhaps more comfortable with the current ways of working and take a little bit more I think the time to convince them. I think in the end, a lot of it comes down to how easy do you make it for them to start using some or all of that new capability. And I think one way is if you start off with, well, there's a training that's going to take you 2 hours, and then after that, you're going to get some benefits. That's not the way to go. I think it's really, you train people, you inform people as they go, as they use, as they get benefits from the tool. I found that within the procurement organization, it was much easier to get people enthusiastic. I think our tax, legal, finance departments, very easy to get them enthusiastic. But our business partners historically felt that, well, they tell us what they need. They want us to run and come back with, the contract, and after that, the taking well of the supply. So I think that's where we have some further work to do to really make sure that everybody really sees the benefit, we articulate the benefit, and make it easy for them to incrementally start taking benefit of what we're offering.
Henrik, I think that's probably key to it, isn't it? It's about articulating the benefits of how you're optimizing using these programs.
Yeah, and I think it's also simple that procurement is not an island in the organization. I mean, we do this with our stakeholders. For instance, we're introducing a chatbot, or have done that for trucking in the US and other parts of the world, introducing a negotiation chatbot. It takes a lot of work from our frontline people in doing this, and it's fairly instant. So working on it and trying to explain the value, they can see it. And it gives business benefit from day one, but they need to be on the journey from the very start.
So Henrik's just going to go on mute there because he's having a fire alarm. Just test, not an actual fire. So I'm going to ask Xander a question next.
It's off.
It's off. Oh, well done, Henrik. That was nicely negotiated. It did warn me about that before, so well done. And suppliers, I guess. Do you find suppliers coming to you with ideas, or are your suppliers using more of this technology and encouraging you to implement it at your end, Xander?
To a limited degree, I think we found some suppliers where we have I guess new initiatives. For example, we call this equipment passports, so using blockchain to see, okay, how can we really track a piece of equipment from its original, I guess, full origin to into our warehouse, and so we see very mature suppliers working with us on those kinds of initiatives. But at the same time, we have suppliers when we issue a tender, and they tell us, well, look, it's too complicated to go into a digital contract lifecycle management tool. Can I just email you my my proposal? So there's quite a variance there still to overcome. But I think that's again, going back a little bit to the change management, being clear to suppliers what you expect and what kind of help you can offer, and that sometimes in our organization it was something we had, I think, underestimated how much time our frontline ended up having to spend training and helping and hand-holding suppliers with things that we thought were really easy and intuitive to them, and then certain markets, I would say, or certain categories, suppliers are less mature and struggle more than others. So it's definitely something to keep in mind.
Henrik, do you see that?
Great point. Yeah, it's a great point, because some people think that, oh, now we have these fantastic tools, we can cut the time in half. No, you will invest upfront, and you will then get the benefits over time in efficiency and hopefully improved understanding. So this is about hand-holding stakeholders internally, and definitely also your suppliers. That investment comes up front and not in the negotiation piece, because that is definitely taken care of by many of these bots. But you need to invest the same amount of time initially to get this really introduced. And then you can harvest the efficiencies on both sides. And of course, that takes a different dialogue, which is the upskilling we are back to, that then people can have that dialogue. So it actually fits nicely together, but it needs to be explained the first couple of times you do it. But then you can harvest the efficiencies down the line.
And in terms of software providers, bot providers, AI, what's the market like? Is there just a ton of stuff out there? Is it difficult to find what's new? Because I imagine there's quite a lot of like small tech companies that are coming up with some real innovative stuff. How do you even go about trying to find who you should be working with?
Well, you're right. There are many suppliers. So of course you can use I guess consulting firms to help you with I guess weeding out perhaps some of that for you. I found on LinkedIn, I think these kinds of events help as well. People know to I guess reach out to you, share what they have. I think there's a lot of appetite in the market as well of startup companies to do a proof of technology, a proof of concept with you, do a pilot with you. But I think that the key thing is for your organization to really have a long-term vision, a long-term plan of where do you want to move to, and then start incrementally build towards that. And I think if you I guess carve it up, your scope too much without having that end in mind, you may end up with a landscape that is unmanageable and ends up being very costly.
Great stuff.
I think it's a good point. I don't think we have seen this play out to the end yet, and some applications are great upfront, but when they need to fit into big corporates, that's where you get the challenge. But I think you need to be out there. You need to be out there scouting. You need to participate in all kinds of digital events, because it's out there and it's moving fast. We have an arm in Maersk that takes care of growth companies in the vicinity of what we're doing, and we see a lot of interesting stuff. And hopefully we are also an interesting customer for them to do a proof of concept. So working with us and allowing them to fail, allowing us to fail, and But there's also some very proven successes out there already that you can benchmark with other companies. How did that work? And then get them into your system. So as long as you don't have resistance internally, then you're on a good path.
Yeah. And Hendrik, on that, if I may, Emma.
Yeah.
I think if you have a really strong use case, so there's a problem, I've got the support from the organization, my stakeholders, they all agree we want to fix this problem. And if you take that and then you go to a market and then you look for a technology provider, hey, can you help me address this problem? Then as you go through the process, you have everybody that you need working with you rather than, like Henrik said, you coming up with a great tool. And the analogy I've heard is it's a great, aspirin, great painkiller, looking for a headache. That's not the way you want to be seen. It needs to come the other way around.
And I guess giving people in your team the headspace to just go out there and do some research, to play around with these tools, to find out what works. And Henrik, like you say, to test things and find that some things fail and some things work is something that you should invest in your teams. So there's two questions that have come through that are fairly similar, and I think we'll address those now in terms of when you set out a business case or look for investment for these kind of things, are you setting out what your problem is and how you want to achieve it, and some kind of KPIs around that? So do you have success factors in mind at the beginning to get that investment over the line?
I think for our part, you need to have that, because if you don't have that already, you don't know what problem you're going to solve. Yeah. I mean, they might not be all articulated down to the last dime here, but at least you know what problem you're going to solve. You know that with your stakeholders. You know how it fits into the overall vision, as Sander also mentioned. So yes, and the company also needs to, the one you enter up with, know what it is you're trying to solve, and that the scope is clear, so that we are not running around trying to solve everything, but a fairly narrow scope. This is the solution we are looking for. If they can then introduce something on top, you sort of stop and say, yeah, we might need that, we add it on. But being clear on the scope, to me, is really the key here.
Yeah, and from a KPI or value or benefits perspective, one of the things we did, I think fairly early on, was we sat down with our finance department and said, okay, when we make these benefits cases, can we use a couple of standard repeating elements that we can use to build back every time a benefits case? So we look at, say, cycle time, the faster we can get from a demand to a contract, what's it worth to us? And we came up with a methodology to say, well, it's worth, every day is worth X amount of money. An hour of somebody's time, if we liberate time from earlier when we were speaking about ending non-value add activities, how much time or how much value is that hour? And we went through a series of those. So every time somebody comes with a problem, and if they define the problem well, you can quickly say, okay, actually, so we're going to liberate this person's time or that person's time, or it's going to be faster, or we're going to be making better and more informed decisions, which creates better commercial deals, which is worth X% of the value of the deal. So once you have those metrics defined as standards, I would almost say, then when new benefits cases come in very quickly, you can translate it. And then from a KPI perspective, then you can do exactly that. You can measure how much faster are we, how many fewer people. And I think as you are digitalizing, what I'm finding is that the more digital my process is, the more data I get, the more insight I can just get out of the system that tells me, hey, this is how many steps did the process take, how long these steps take, how many people are involved. And it gets easier and easier from there.
And I guess not all of your business cases have to be around efficiencies or some kind of ROI and payback on the investment. We talked earlier, if you're not investing in technology, you're not standing still, you're falling behind. So some of the investment surely has to be just good business sense, whether that's getting the intel that you need from a risk perspective, or whether that's retaining and attracting talent. Henrik, would you agree?
I think it's about insights, and it's about the business increasingly looking for procurement to be able to provide those insights. I mean, we are talking to hundreds of thousands of people. If we look at our supplier landscape, getting that insights in form of data into our company and making it usable for the products and services we create for our customers, that's when procurement make a fantastic dent and impact to the business. So if we can create sort of a procurement mind of data and insights, it's hugely valuable for the company and also for our vendors, because they become part of creating our products.
Sander, you agree there? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that this goes back a little bit again, upskilling your organization. Our category managers, when I asked in the past, what kind of data would you like? The one answer, and it was usually one answer I would get, was, it's my spend data. I want to know where I'm spending money. Well, that's great. That's a lagging indicator. I want to start looking at more predictive data, and now we can do that. But it means that they need to understand, and most of them very quickly switch on, of course. But for them to start thinking in a different way of, okay, well, what kind of data must be captured somewhere in the process, and how can I get to that data in a reliable way to start predicting and start looking forward.
And on that point, talking of looking forward, what are the next areas that you're looking for, that you're currently looking at in your procurement teams or in the business that you can optimize even further? Sander, what's kind of in the future?
Yeah, I mentioned, I think, earlier a little bit about this negotiation tool that uses some algorithms that we can tell what to look for and how to negotiate. I would say the less complex deals, and this is how I see it. Like, you start with the lesser complex deals, and as you keep adding algorithms, and as you keep embedding these tools in your workflow, so that somebody in your workflow has to say, in certain instances, it's approved or it's not approved, which is essentially teaching your machine learning tool to get better and better at what it's doing. So I think the negotiation part, we're looking at, this is why I really like the contract. So I mentioned earlier, we assemble a contract tailored. So there are 6 million different combinations we can get a contract put together. But then, of course, the suppliers still have this habit of coming back with red lines. Don't know why they do that. And then we have this negotiation. Okay, what can we accept? And we have all kinds of more or less static tools today to help our procurement professionals. But now with AI, we can start more and more telling them, well, like these 50, 60%, don't worry about those. Just accept them, it's fine. But these, negotiate and put these clauses in, or counter with this and this. Now, that kind of technology, I think, is quite exciting.
Excellent. Henrik, what's on the horizon for you guys?
I think that what I just mentioned about the procurement mind as sort of a headline for bringing data to life, bringing insights to life, that's one thing. We're working on that. But the other thing is also the sheer negotiations, a bit like Sander is saying, we are spending a lot of time negotiating stuff that two bots with the proper AI, they can get to that optimality that is there, so that we can spend our time with what is it we're going to work with our vendors and partners on in the future.
Yeah.
So have those quality talks about what does the future look like. Let's not spend the time negotiation right here and now, because it's done. There's bots that are smarter than us who can say, this is where your price point is, this is the quality, this is the service. Now let's spend the time on the future. What do we need to collaborate on to get to where we want to go and where our partners want to go? So those are the two things we will be looking at.
Excellent. And if for our viewers tuning in today who are yet to embark on their journey with using AI and machine learning, where would you say there were some quick wins or areas where they could really make a start and the biggest impact? What advice would you give for our audience? Sander?
I think the value stream map. So start understanding, okay, what does my process look like? Where do we have these high volume, low value type activities, manual activities, and start working with bots. I remember a couple of years back, we had like, well, where can we use it? We couldn't think of any opportunity, and now we have this long backlog of bots we want to develop. Low cost, a very quick, high adoption rate. Very positive experience.
Henrik?
I'll add to that. I fully buy into that. But also, if you have a position of strength where you know what you're doing is absolutely well, and you just need to add sort of the robotics to it, start from that point of view, because you'll be comfortable in doing it. And it shouldn't be the most complex thing, but where you really sense we're good at this. In our case, that was going to market. That's why we created our bots around the e-auctions and picking from catalogs. So find a place of strength and develop from that, because people will be confident in that space.
I think that's a really great point. And we just had a really quick question coming in the end here about, are there some foundational building blocks that you need to have in place in order to invest in this? And I guess it's like you say, Henrik, it's putting it in place where you've got that stuff nailed, rather than trying to overlay it against a problem area.
Yeah, because your stakeholders will buy in. They know you do well in this area. So if you add something on top, they will probably trust you to do that and do it well. Plus, if you have external parties helping you, you will also be better in taking it in and understanding how it sits in your platform, in your area. So yeah, definitely a recommendation.
Fabulous. Right, we're out of time. That flew by. Thank you very much, Sander and Henrik. Thank you for sharing your insights with us today. That's fascinating. And thanks everyone for sharing your questions with the audience, with our panel today as well. So another quick break. So head off and do some networking. Download that report from Workday Area, the report they did in partnership with Harvard Business Review. It's a great product there. And then we'll be back for our last session at 11:25. So enjoy your break.